baby is truly amazing, and I think all parents must know this. They're more than anything you can imagine.
Thank you for waking me, Prince, because you know what I did? I overslept, and I have medical school today.
The camera light blinked red, and Diane Keaton smiled softly, half amused, half weary. The clip was short, almost too quiet to notice at first. She sat in her Los Angeles home, surrounded by light, her trademark hat perched slightly off-center. "We all misunderstood something back then," she said almost to herself. Then she laughed. That unmistakable Keaton laugh, bright, self-aware, tinged with melancholy. It would be one of her last on-camera appearances. Within hours, the internet caught fire. Had she meant her career, a role, a relationship? Or was she referring to Baby Boom, the 1987 comedy that made her an icon and, unintentionally, the center of a decades-long cultural argument? For nearly 40 years, Diane Keaton had avoided that subject. She'd sidestepped questions, deflected controversies, and kept her private reflections behind her famously walled-off smile. But in her final year, she broke that silence, and what she revealed changed how millions saw both her and the film that defined an era. Was Baby Boom ever really about motherhood? Or was it always about something else, something the world wasn't ready to admit in 1987? And why did Diane wait until the end of her life to tell us? Diane Keaton was never just another actress. She was an idea, a living paradox wrapped in oversized suits and soft neuroses. She began as a stage performer in the late 60s, singing off Broadway and learning how to disappear into characters before the world even noticed she was there. When Annie Hall hit in 1977, everything changed. Her nervous laughter, her boyish fashion, her refusal to conform, they made her a cultural symbol. America fell in love with her authenticity, that rare quality that felt unscripted even when it was. She wasn't glamorous in the conventional sense. She was human, intelligent, and relatable. But success came with expectations. Hollywood wanted her to stay the same quirky, approachable, the thinking man's dream girl. Yet Keaton kept evolving. In Reds, she played a radical journalist. In Crimes of the Heart, a vulnerable Southern woman. And then came Baby Boom. It was supposed to be a simple romantic comedy. A career-obsessed executive unexpectedly inherits a baby girl and is forced to choose between her corporate life and newfound motherhood. But the timing couldn't have been more loaded. America was deep in a conversation about feminism, working women, and family. The film became an unintentional lightning rod. Audiences adored it. Critics divided over it. Feminist scholars wrote essays about whether it betrayed or celebrated women's independence. And through it all, Keaton remained silent. She smiled at premieres, answered press questions with charm, but never offered her personal view. Because privately, Baby Boom hit closer to home than anyone realized. She was in her early 40s, unmarried, without children, navigating a business that often punished women for aging. Her character's dilemma, career versus personal life, wasn't fiction, it was her reflection. She once told a friend, "The scariest part of acting is when the character starts telling you who you are." Baby Boom did exactly that. But here's where it gets complicated. Keaton's silence over the years wasn't disinterest, it was armor. The film's feminist backlash wounded her more deeply than she let on. People began projecting their cultural frustrations onto her face. In talk shows, she was asked if she regretted being single, if she secretly longed for the baby her character couldn't part with. It was no longer about J.C. Wyatt, the character. It was about Diane Keaton, the woman. And rather than feed that machine, she chose to retreat. It was November 1986, just outside Manchester, Vermont. The air was sharp, the kind that turns every breath into visible mist. The farmhouse used for filming was a real one, drafty, creaking, surrounded by frost-bitten apple trees. Keaton arrived before dawn most mornings, bundled in wool coats and knit hats, sipping black coffee between takes. Crew members said she carried an old film camera everywhere, quietly taking Polaroids between scenes. She was curious, observant, and fiercely protective of the story. Nancy Meyers and Charles Shire, the writer-director team behind Baby Boom, wanted to make a comedy that said something deeper about American womanhood. But the studio wanted it simpler, romantic, light, marketable. The tension simmered behind the scenes. Keaton, always the perfectionist, pushed for realism. She didn't want J.C. Wyatt to be a cartoonish career woman softened by motherhood. She wanted her to struggle, to fail, to question, to rebuild. "I don't think she knows who she is yet," Keaton told Myers one morning, pacing the kitchen set. Her instincts were right. When Baby Boom premiered in October 1987, it became a surprise hit, earning over $25 million and turning Keaton into an unlikely feminist figure. Yet while audiences cheered, critics argued. Some praised its warmth and humanity. Others accused it of retreating from the feminist ideals of the 1970s. For Keaton, the praise and criticism blurred together into noise. During a particularly tough press junket in Los Angeles, a reporter asked, "So Diane, is this your apology to the women's movement?" She froze. A flicker of discomfort passed across her face before she composed herself. "It's just a story," she said lightly, "about a woman learning how to live." But the question stuck with her. Years later, she would recall that moment as the beginning of her retreat from public discourse. "I realized," she said, "that people weren't really asking about J.C. Wyatt. They were asking about me, and I didn't have an answer." She turned her focus inward, writing, collecting photographs, caring for her family. The topic of Baby Boom became her invisible line in the sand. She never crossed it again. That silence, gentle, deliberate, and unbroken, lasted almost 40 years. By the 2020s, Diane Keaton had become Hollywood's elder stateswoman of charm. She was beloved, eccentric, and ironically more private than ever. She lived surrounded by Spanish-style architecture, rescued furniture, and shelves filled with family journals. She still walked her neighborhood in hats and wide-leg pants, the same way she did in her 30s. To outsiders, she seemed ageless. But friends noticed something shifting beneath the surface. She was reflective, one longtime collaborator said. You could tell she was preparing to say something before she was gone. She had been diagnosed with osteoporosis, though she rarely mentioned it publicly. The energy that once filled talk, shows, and award stages now seemed gentler. Yet her mind remained razor-sharp, curious, self-critical, and endlessly fascinated by how people change over time. What haunted her most wasn't the roles she didn't take or the awards she didn't win. It was misunderstanding. "I don't think people ever really saw me," she once wrote in her journal. Later quoted in the Boston Review, "They saw who they wanted to see." The same could be said of Baby Boom. In the early 2020s, social media rediscovered the film. Younger women began posting clips, celebrating it as feminist comfort cinema. Others called it prophetic, a movie that predicted modern work-life burnout. TikTok montages of Keaton juggling baby bottles and briefcases went viral, reintroducing her to an audience who weren't even born when it premiered. The irony was rich. The film, once accused of betraying feminism, was now being reclaimed as feminist empowerment. Friends say she found it both sweet and strange. She laughed at memes of her younger self, but privately admitted to feeling bittersweet about the sudden praise. She had carried the weight of misinterpretation for so long that even appreciation felt complicated. Now, if you're wondering how it felt to live decades defined by a single movie, the answer is both pride and fatigue. Baby Boom had given her one of the richest performances of her career, and also one of the heaviest shadows. During her final year, she began giving small, thoughtful interviews again. She talked about aging, legacy, and her love for her adopted children, Dexter and Duke. She reminisced about her mother's diaries and how they shaped her need for self-reflection. But one question always lingered in the background. Would she ever talk about Baby Boom again? And then, in early 2025, she agreed to a retrospective interview for a Women in Film documentary. Those close to her said it was spontaneous and act of release more than promotion. She reportedly told her assistant, "Maybe it's time to clear the air." No one realized it would become her farewell. It happened quietly, without the fanfare she'd once inspired. The date was September 6th, 2025, a warm afternoon in Los Angeles. A PBS special called Women Who Changed the Frame had invited Diane Keaton to discuss her legacy. She almost said no. Then, as one producer later recalled, she called back and simply said, "Let's talk about the one I never talked about." When the cameras rolled, she wore beige linen, no makeup, but a slick of rose lip tint. Her voice was softer now, but steady. The interviewer asked cautiously, You've often avoided discussing baby boom. Why? Diane exhaled. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers interlaced. Because it wasn't just a movie to me, she said. It was a mirror. And sometimes the mirror shows you things you weren't ready to see. For the next 20 minutes, she spoke with a candor that stunned everyone in the room. She explained how baby boom had been reshaped by studio executives who feared it was too political for a mainstream audience. We wanted to show that a woman could redefine success, and she said, but they wanted her to end up with a man and a baby food brand. We compromised, but not completely. She revealed she'd fought to keep key scenes where J.C. Wyatt breaks down alone, questioning her worth outside of work. Those moments, she said, were real. That was me. Then came the line that would dominate headlines for weeks. The controversy wasn't about feminism. It was about fear. Everyone, men, women, critics, we were all scared of what change meant. Her tone wasn't bitter. It was wistful, almost forgiving. She admitted she had once resented the film's interpretation, but came to see it as a reflection of its time and of herself. I didn't hate baby boom, she said. I hated that it made me confront what I didn't have yet, a family, a sense of balance. I thought playing a mother would make me one. I was wrong. Her honesty was devastating and beautiful. She smiled faintly after saying it, then whispered, but eventually I did find my version of it. Social media exploded with admiration. Younger actresses called it the masterclass no one expected. Journalists called her confession a full-circle reckoning. Fans flooded comment sections with gratitude. A week later, Keaton sent a short handwritten note to the interviewer. Thanks for asking what everyone was too polite to ask. I feel lighter. 35 days later, on October 11, 2025, Diane Keaton passed away peacefully in her Los Angeles home, surrounded by family, her journals, and a window open to the sunset. That PBS clip, her soft-spoken reckoning with the film that shaped her, became her final message to the world. When the clip circulated online, tabloids rushed to attach headlines like, Diane Keaton's baby boom scandal exposed. But those who actually watched the full interview realized something entirely different. There was no scandal, just honesty, wrapped in grace. Over the years, several myths had grown around baby boom, and her interview quietly dismantled them one by one. Myth number one, she hated the film. She didn't. She cherished it. But as she explained in her 2014 memoir, let's just say it wasn't pretty. Sometimes your best work comes wrapped in your deepest confusion. The press turned her avoidance into disdain, when really it was protection. Myth number two, she feuded with Nancy Meyers. In truth, they remained friends for decades. When Meyers was asked after Keaton's death, she said, Diane was the reason baby boom had a soul. We didn't fight, we collaborated. She pushed us to dig deeper. Myth number three, she disapproved of the film's message about motherhood. In reality, baby boom inspired her to adopt. She once admitted, that movie made me curious about love that doesn't ask for permission. 10 years later, she adopted her daughter Dexter, followed by her son Duke. I think JC taught me what love might look like when it's unplanned. But perhaps the greatest misconception was this, that her silence equaled shame. It didn't. It equaled sovereignty. In the 1980s, a woman's private life wasn't her own once she became famous. Questions about motherhood, marriage, and gender identity were fair game. Keaton learned that early and chose silence as her defense. Sometime, she said once, the best thing you can say is nothing at all until it means something. When she finally spoke in 2025, she wasn't seeking vindication. She was offering context. Her words reframed decades of misunderstanding into a portrait of quiet resilience. And what no one expected was how her death transformed baby boom from a nostalgia piece into a cultural document. Within weeks, the film topped digital streaming charts. Film critics revisited it with new appreciation, calling it prophetic, radical, and years ahead of its time. In retrospectives, academics pointed out that Keaton's portrayal of J.C. Wyatt predicted the modern lean-in era, the working mother paradox, even the burnout epidemic. Diane had always been a mirror reflecting where society stood and where it feared to look. In life, she acted it. In death, she clarified it. The morning after her death, social media filled with tributes. Not the usual celebrity condolences, these were personal, intimate, heartfelt. Women posted photos of themselves in blazers, holding babies, captioned, "This movie made me believe I could do both." Her daughter Dexter wrote on Instagram, "Mom taught me that silence can be as powerful as words, that what you don't say defines you just as much as what you do." Her son Duke added a simple note, "She was my North Star." Colleagues echoed similar sentiments. Al Pacino called her the bravest listener I ever knew.
You're a great artist. I remember it and I love it, and I love you forever.
Warren Beatty described her as a tornado of empathy. Nancy Meyers posted a behind-the-scenes photo from Baby Boom with the caption, "She didn't just play a mother, she invented one for herself." Her longtime assistant, Eve Johnson, shared something quietly profound in a podcast. Tribute. Diane wasn't haunted by fame. She was fascinated by it, by how people turned stories into shields. And in the end, she just wanted to tell hers honestly. The Baby Boom resurgence became a celebration, not a controversy. Online forums brimmed with fans discovering the movie for the first time. They noticed the small details, the exhaustion in Keaton's eyes during the baby's night-crying scenes, the joy in her laugh when JC sells her homemade baby food, the vulnerability when she admits she's lonely. For decades, critics had mistaken those moments for artifice. Now they saw what they truly were, fragments of Keaton herself. And perhaps that's the secret of her legacy. She blurred the line between performance and truth so gracefully that in the end, the world couldn't tell them apart. Even in her absence, Diane's influence continued to ripple. Young actresses began citing her as their creative compass. Emma Stone called her a lesson in how to be unforgettable without being loud.
But honestly, Diane, this experience is incredibly special to me, to be able to take part in celebrating how meaningful your work and your spirit have been to the world. You have...
Greta Gerwig said, "Everything I know about writing women came from watching Baby Boom when I was 13. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Nancy Meyers quietly rewatched the film alone. "We made it for women like us," she told Vanity Fair, and she carried it longer than any of us ever realized. So what did Diane Keaton really mean when she said, "We all misunderstood something back then"? Maybe she was talking about Baby Boom. Maybe she was talking about herself. Maybe she was talking about us, about the way culture devours its icons, then spends decades trying to understand them. When Baby Boom first premiered, America was still wrestling with the concept of modern womanhood. The idea that a woman could be ambitious and nurturing, driven yet tender, was seen as paradoxical. But Diane embodied that paradox with every fiber of her being. In the years that followed, she lived the truth the film hinted at, that fulfillment doesn't fit one shape, one path, or one decade. She built a family on her own terms, created art that defied category, and never apologized for any of it. By breaking her silence in her final days, she didn't rewrite her history, she completed it. Her confession wasn't a scandal or a secret. It was an act of grace. She wanted to leave behind not just her films, but her understanding that life, like art, doesn't always make sense while you're living it. Now, if you're wondering what lesson she'd want us to take from it all, maybe it's this. You don't owe the world your story before you're ready to tell it. And when you finally do, make sure it's the truth that belongs to you. In her final weeks, Diane spent her evenings near a window that overlooked her garden. Friends said she'd sit there for hours as the California light faded, humming old show tunes, sometimes laughing at her own thoughts. One night, a friend visiting her home asked what she was thinking about. She smiled faintly. "About Vermont," she said. "About that baby, that house, that winter." Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills, the same kind of quiet gold she'd once stood under while filming Baby Boom. And for a moment, time folded. The camera, the farmhouse, the woman, the myth, they all became one. She looked out again, and her voice, barely above a whisper, carried the same words that started it all. "We all misunderstood something back then." Then she laughed softly. "But that's okay. I think I understand it now." And with that, Diane Keaton, the woman who never fit anyone's mold, finally found peace in being understood on her own terms.